All right. Hey, everyone. So welcome to this deep dive.
Hey.
We're going to be talking about the potential for market volatility in 2025
Okay.
with a focus on Bitcoin, obviously.
All right.
We've got a couple of really interesting sources here that we're going to be diving into.
Okay.
One of them is a financial analysis article
Hmm.
looking ahead at trends going into 2025.
Yeah.
And another one is analyzing current investor behavior
Yeah.
and sort of the potential for an economic crisis on the horizon.
Okay. Got it.
Just imagine, a world on the brink of recession with investors just like scrambling for safe havens to protect their assets.
Sure.
And that's kind of the landscape that we're dealing with right now. And so
Yeah.
big question is, where does Bitcoin fit into all of this?
Right.
Is it a safe haven
Yeah.
or is it just another risky bet?
Well, it's funny. I was thinking about that just the other day. The concept of a safe haven is a pretty slippery one, right?
It is, yeah.
Because you're talking about an asset that's supposed to hold its value or maybe even increase in value
Right.
during times of economic turmoil.
Yeah.
And, gold is like the classic example, right?
Right.
But can Bitcoin, with all its ups and downs, really live up to that same title?
Yeah. And it has seen some
Yeah.
major ups and downs.
For sure.
Bitcoin has. And just recently, the crypto market took a pretty significant hit, dropping 13.42% in a matter of days. That translates to a drop from $3.8 trillion to $3.29 trillion,
Okay.
which definitely got people's attention. And
Yeah.
this crypto dip seems to be mirroring some broader market trends.
Yeah, it does. And, a big part of understanding this is understanding how investors are behaving.
Okay.
And
What are they doing?
it's kind of interesting because the Fed recently cut interest rates,
Yeah.
which is something that's typically meant to stimulate the economy and boost confidence, right?
Right.
But instead of reacting with woohoo, everything's great, investors are being really cautious.
Really?
Almost as if they're sensing some kind of danger on the horizon. Like they're looking at the Fed's actions and saying, wait a minute, are you sure everything is okay?
So what are they picking up on?
Well, there are a few red flags out there.
Like what?
So one thing is that the 10-year Treasury yield,
Yeah.
which basically reflects how much return investors expect from safe government bonds,
Okay.
that has jumped to a 6-month high.
Okay.
And at the same time, we've got inflation creeping up.
Yeah.
It's also at a 6-month high, which adds another layer of concern
Right.
to the mix.
And then the Fed goes and increases their 2025 inflation forecast to 2.5%, up from 2.1% just a few months ago.
Wow.
So it's like they're trying to keep inflation under control, but then their own forecast is saying, well, it's going to be higher than we thought. And they're now saying that inflation won't hit their 2% target until 2027.
Oh, wow.
So that's 2 years later than they originally anticipated.
So what does that mean for Bitcoin?
Well, that's what I'm wondering, because, remember that dramatic plunge that we talked about earlier from its all-time high of $108,000?
Yeah.
Some might look at that and just think, oh, it's a classic sell the news.
Right.
Panic driven by fears of a looming recession.
Right.
Investors are just getting spoofed and selling off their Bitcoin.
Sure.
But, is that really the whole story?
Well, while short-term panic might play a role, there could be something bigger at play here.
Okay.
We can't forget about that massive $7.6 trillion in U.S. debt.
Right.
That's set to mature in 2025.
Yeah.
And this could force the government to issue new bonds with higher interest rates.
To refinance.
Yeah, exactly, to refinance.
Okay.
And, this could potentially create a ripple effect that triggers a serious financial crisis.
Oh, wow.
And we've seen this kind of scenario play out before, and the results can be pretty devastating.
So we've got this, potential economic storm brewing on the horizon.
Right.
And we've got to ask, is Bitcoin a shield against that?
Yeah.
Is it a true safe haven, or is it going to get swept away in the chaos?
Right.
It seems like the experts are kind of divided on this one.
Yeah, they are. And it's helpful to understand the terms bullish and bearish because it kind of helps unpack those different viewpoints.
Okay.
So bullish basically means optimistic, like expecting prices to rise.
Okay.
So those who are bullish on Bitcoin, they see this current correction as a buying opportunity,
Okay.
a chance to get in before the next big rally.
Right.
Bearish, on the other hand, means pessimistic, right?
Right.
Expecting prices to fall.
Got it.
And the people who are bearish on Bitcoin are worried that we're heading for another major downturn, like the brutal 2022 bear market where Bitcoin lost a significant chunk of its value.
Right.
So yeah, you've got two very different outlooks.
Two very different, yeah.
Yeah.
So what should the listener be paying attention to make sense of all of this?
Well, one crucial factor is the behavior of institutional investors. And these are the big players, right?
The big guys.
Yeah, major financial institutions, hedge funds,
Mm-hmm.
even publicly traded companies
Okay.
that have started pouring capital into Bitcoin.
Interesting.
For example, there's a large cryptocurrency ETF called IBIT and a company called MicroStrategy, known as MSTR, on the stock market,
Okay.
both of which hold substantial amounts of Bitcoin.
How much are we talking?
Well, together they control 996,290 Bitcoins,
Whoa.
which is almost 4.7% of the entire Bitcoin supply.
Wow.
So we're not talking small potatoes here.
No.
The actions of these institutional giants, whether they buy more, hold steady, or start selling, could have a seismic impact on the market.
Right.
They're like the whales in the Bitcoin ocean, and we're all just trying to figure out which way they're going to swim.
Right.
It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess we'll have to stay tuned and see what happens
Absolutely.
with these big institutions.
Yeah. Sounds good. These institutional investors, with their massive Bitcoin holdings, they're really adding a whole new dimension to the crypto landscape,
Yeah, it's true.
Their moves can create waves
Totally.
that ripple through the entire market.
It's like they're the big whales in the Bitcoin ocean.
Right.
And everyone else is just trying to figure out which way they're going to swim.
That's a great analogy, because right now, those whales seem to be betting on Bitcoin's long-term potential.
They do. Yeah.
But the question is, will their belief be enough to weather a potential economic storm?
Right.
Or could they get spooked and decide to head for calmer waters,
Right. Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right?
It is.
It's like we've got these two opposing forces at play.
Yeah.
On one side, you have the institutional investors driven by data, long-term strategies, and maybe even, a bit of ideology.
Sure.
They see Bitcoin as this revolutionary asset, a digital gold
Right.
that could reshape the financial system. And then on the other side, you've got the average investor, maybe a bit more cautious, a bit more reactive to the headlines.
Right, yeah.
They might see Bitcoin as an exciting opportunity,
Yeah.
but also a risky one.
Of course.
And when those fears of a recession start swirling, they might be quicker to hit the sell button.
Absolutely. Yeah, fear is a powerful motivator.
So are we basically witnessing a clash of perspectives here?
It's possible.
A battle between the institutional giants and the collective wisdom, or maybe the fear, of the crowd.
Yeah, it's a fascinating dynamic, and it's really hard to predict which force will ultimately prevail.
Yeah.
I mean, if enough individual investors lose confidence and start selling off their Bitcoin, it could create this like a downward spiral
Wow.
that even the institutional heavyweights might struggle to control,
Yeah.
It's like imagine a flock of birds suddenly changing direction. Even the largest bird might get swept away in that current.
That's a good point. So what does history tell us? I mean, has Bitcoin faced similar economic challenges in the past?
Well, that's the thing. Bitcoin is still relatively young, right?
It is.
So its history is limited.
Right.
But we can look back at the 2008 financial crisis for some clues.
Okay.
Because that was like a period of extreme economic turmoil,
It was.
triggered by a collapse in the housing market and a cascade of bank failures.
Right.
And a lot of traditional assets like stocks and real estate just plummeted in value.
Oh, wow.
But gold held its ground.
It did.
It proved its resilience as a safe haven.
So was Bitcoin even around back then?
It was, but it was like in its very early stages.
Oh, okay.
Just a fledgling technology with a tiny market cap.
Got it.
It didn't really register on the radar of most investors.
So I guess it's hard to say how it would have performed in a crisis of that magnitude.
It is, yeah. Some argue that Bitcoin's decentralized nature and limited supply would have made it a safe haven.
Okay.
But, that's purely hypothetical.
Hypothetical, right?
Right.
So we're kind of in uncharted territory here.
In a way, we are, yeah.
But let's focus on the present. What are some of the arguments for Bitcoin as a safe haven?
Well, Bitcoin proponents point to several key factors.
Like what?
First, there's its scarcity,
Okay.
There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins in existence.
Right, yeah.
This limited supply, combined with a growing demand, creates this like built-in scarcity that could drive up its value, especially during times of economic uncertainty.
So it's kind of like gold in a way.
It is very similar to gold, which is also a finite resource.
So the idea is that when everything else is going haywire,
Right.
Bitcoin will stand strong because it's scarce and people will want to hold on to it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
And then there's the decentralization factor.
Right.
Bitcoin operates on a blockchain,
Yeah.
which is basically a distributed ledger
Uh-huh.
that's not controlled by any single entity.
Right.
This makes it resistant to censorship and government manipulation.
Right.
Unlike traditional currencies, which can be devalued by central banks printing more money, Bitcoin's supply is governed by a predetermined algorithm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that does sound pretty appealing in a world where governments are struggling
Right.
to manage their economies.
Exactly.
But, I mean, surely there are arguments against Bitcoin as a safe haven too, right?
Oh, absolutely there are.
Like what?
Critics point to Bitcoin's volatility.
Yeah.
It's known for those wild price swings,
It is?
which can make it a risky investment, especially for those seeking stability.
Right.
And despite its growing adoption, Bitcoin is still a relatively niche asset.
Okay.
Its market is much smaller and less liquid than traditional safe havens like gold or U.S. Treasuries.
Gotcha.
This means it can be more susceptible to price manipulation and sudden shifts in sentiment.
Okay, so we've got strong arguments on both sides.
We do.
But here's something that I've been thinking about. Remember how we were talking about that massive $7.6 trillion debt
Yeah.
looming in 2025? What if that's actually a catalyst for Bitcoin's rise?
Interesting.
Hear me out.
Okay.
If the U.S. government is forced to print more money to refinance that debt, it could lead to inflation
Sure.
and a loss of confidence in the dollar.
Okay. I see where you're going with this.
Right. And people might start looking for alternative assets to protect their wealth.
Makes sense.
And Bitcoin, with its decentralized nature and limited supply, could become increasingly attractive.
That's an interesting perspective.
Right.
And it's certainly possible. In fact, some analysts believe that a major global financial crisis could be the trigger that pushes Bitcoin into the mainstream.
Really?
Yeah. They argue that when traditional systems fail, people will turn to alternative solutions.
It makes sense.
And Bitcoin, with its resilience and independence, could emerge as a winner.
So Bitcoin could actually benefit from a crisis.
It's a bold prediction.
It is.
But here's another wrinkle to consider.
Okay.
What if institutional investors, those whales we were talking about, start seeing the writing on the wall?
Uh-huh.
What if they anticipate a crisis and start loading up on Bitcoin as a hedge?
Interesting.
Their massive buying power could create a surge in demand, driving up the price, and potentially triggering a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's like a financial thriller unfolding in real time.
Right.
We've got all these powerful forces at play,
We do.
all with their own agendas and motivations. It's impossible to say for sure what will happen,
It is.
but it's going to be fascinating to watch.
Absolutely. And for our listener, this is a time to stay informed, do their own research,
Right.
consider all sides of the argument.
Yeah.
This is not about blindly following the crowd or making impulsive decisions. It's about understanding the forces at play and making informed choices that align with their own risk tolerance and financial goals.
It really sounds like we're talking about a potential paradigm shift here.
Yeah.
If a crisis does hit and Bitcoin emerges as like a safe haven,
Mm-hmm.
it could completely change the way we think about money and finance.
Mm-hmm. It really could. Imagine a world where people, I don't know, maybe they lose faith in traditional institutions and they turn to these decentralized digital assets like
Right.
Bitcoin for
Right.
stability and security.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a disruptive concept, right?
it is.
And it's certainly not without its challenges,
Right.
but it's a possibility that we have to consider.
Okay, so let's maybe zoom out for a second here
Okay.
and, bring this back to our listener. We've covered a lot of ground
We have.
exploring the economic landscape,
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin's potential role as a safe haven, the motivations of different players
Right.
in the market. So for someone who's been listening to this deep dive,
Yeah.
trying to make sense of it all,
Yeah.
what's the one key message they should take away?
I think the most important takeaway is that we're living in a time of unprecedented change and uncertainty.
Yeah, it feels that way.
The global economy is facing some serious challenges,
It is.
and the old rules of finance might not apply anymore. And Bitcoin, with its unique characteristics, is emerging as a potential disruptor.
Right.
And its role in the future is still being written.
So it's not just about Bitcoin's price going up or down,
No.
right? It's about something much bigger, a potential shift in the balance of power.
Exactly. This is about the evolution of money itself.
Yeah.
For centuries, we've relied on centralized institutions to manage our finances, to issue currencies, to provide stability.
Yeah.
But what happens when those institutions falter?
Yeah, that's the question.
When people lose faith in the system,
Right.
that's when alternative solutions like Bitcoin start to gain traction.
So we're kind of witnessing like a financial revolution in slow motion.
In a way, we are, yeah.
And like any revolution, I guess there will be winners and losers.
Of course, those who understand the forces at play, who adapt and innovate, they'll be in a better position to thrive in this new landscape.
So what does that mean for our listener?
Yeah.
The individual who's trying to navigate this complex world. What practical steps can they take to prepare for what might be coming?
Well, first and foremost, it's about education.
Okay.
The more you understand about economics, finance,
Yeah.
and emerging technologies like Bitcoin,
Uh-huh.
the better equipped you'll be to make informed decisions.
Right.
Don't just rely on headlines or the opinions of others.
Right.
Do your own research, explore different perspectives, and develop your own critical thinking skills.
So it's like that old saying, knowledge is power.
Absolutely. The more you know,
Yeah.
the more control you have over your own financial destiny.
Yeah.
And in a world that's becoming increasingly unpredictable, that knowledge is more valuable than ever.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive.
It has.
I think it's pretty clear that 2025 has the potential to be a pivotal year,
Yeah,
not just for Bitcoin,
right.
but for the entire global financial system.
It does.
As we've discussed, there are many factors at play here.
Lots of factors.
The outcome is still uncertain.
It is.
But one thing's for sure,
Mm.
it's going to be an exciting ride. So buckle up, deep divers, and stay tuned for more insightful explorations as we continue to navigate this ever-evolving world of finance and cryptocurrency.